I was sitting in the cardiology waiting area at Grayson Memorial Hospital, that same padded blue chair I'd claimed every Monday for the last 3 years, pretending I was reading a Nashville ledger from last week. Truth be told, I couldn't tell you a single headline on the page. My eyes were skimming, but my mind was somewhere between the blood pressure machine that always pinched too tight and the memory of Daniel's last days in this exact wing. The room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. A TV in the corner played a daytime judge show that no one watched. The receptionist, a girl young enough to be my granddaughter, kept tapping her acrylic nails against the keyboard like she was sending Morse code to God. It was an ordinary, boring, predictable Monday. Right up until my phone buzzed with Emily's name. Now, you need to understand something before I go on. My daughter doesn't call. She FaceTimes if she wants to show off something she bought. She texts if she needs money. But a phone call? In the middle of the day? With no warning? My stomach tightened before I even slid my thumb across the screen. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice warm. I was already imagining the usual. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in." "Hey, Mom. How was your appointment?" But what I got instead were 38 seconds that split my life into before and after. "Mom," she said, her voice slightly breathless like she was carrying bags or running across the house. "Jason and I are leaving for Greece tomorrow." I blinked. Greece. We sold the lake house in Gatlinburg and your Subaru. The money's already transferred. I'll Venmo you a couple thousand for bills when we land. My throat closed. What do you mean sold? Gotta finish packing. Love you, bye. Click. Silence. Not even a full minute. Not even a chance for me to breathe between her words. Just, we sold your property. We sold your car. We're going to Europe. You'll be okay. Bye. I kept the phone against my ear long after the call ended, like the connection would magically reopen if I stayed still enough. The fluorescent lights above hummed their usual electric buzz, the TV judge yelled about overdue car payments, a nurse wheeled a frail elderly man past me, an elevator dinged. But it all sounded faint, distant, muffled by the roaring inside my head. The lake house. My Subaru. Gone. Not stolen. Not exactly. Not lost. Not technically. But taken. Taken by the one person I never imagined would turn against me. I swallowed, but my throat felt like sandpaper. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard her. Maybe she'd meant something else. Maybe she said we're thinking about selling, not we sold. But no. Emily never said anything by accident. A nurse called my name for vitals check, but I didn't stand. I couldn't. I stared at my phone screen until it dimmed, my reflection staring back at me. Thinning silver hair tucked behind my ears, soft wrinkles around my mouth, the tired blue eyes Daniel used to call storm clouds. I looked like a woman who'd lived an ordinary life. Marriage, work, motherhood, loss. But somehow in all those years, I'd missed one terrible truth. The daughter I loved more than my own heartbeat believed I was disposable. It wasn't about the money. God knows I'm not materialistic. It wasn't even about the house, though that place held 2 decades of memories. It was the casual cruelty. The entitlement. The way she spoke like she'd simply rearranged furniture, not ripped a piece out of my soul. I finally stood, nearly dropping my purse as I did, and walked out of the cardiology wing before the nurse could wave me over. I heard her call, "Ma'am? Ms. Monroe?" But I kept walking. The automatic doors slid open with that whoosh I'd heard 1,000 times, and I stepped into the bright Tennessee afternoon. Sunlight hit my face. For a second, it felt too bright, too sharp, like God was shining a spotlight on me alone. But the real shock waited in the parking lot. My Subaru, the navy blue one Daniel and I bought the year before he died, the one that still smelled faintly like pine cleaner and the peppermint gum he used to chew, was gone. Vanished. The empty parking space, number 42B, stared back at me like an open wound. My breath caught in my chest. The pavement shimmered in the heat. A lone leaf skittered across the asphalt. And my heart. Oh, my heart squeezed like someone had wrapped a fist around it. That car wasn't just metal and paint. It was the last thing Daniel and I decided on together. We had driven to the dealership holding hands. He test drove it while cracking jokes about how it had more buttons than a spaceship. We ate ice cream afterwards and talked about growing old in that car, going on road trips after his retirement, visiting friends in Kentucky, maybe even driving to Arizona to see the Red Rocks. But life doesn't follow plans. Cancer doesn't ask permission. And after he passed, the Subaru became my companion. My safe space, my freedom, the place where I'd cry without having to be strong for anyone. Now Emily had sold it. Sold it. Without my permission. Without even a conversation. I sank onto the concrete curb beside the space, ignoring how the heat seeped through my pants, and clasped my hands to stop the shaking. People walked past me. Some rushing, some limping, some laughing into their phones, but none of them looked twice. I must have looked like any other older woman overwhelmed by hospital stress. But inside I felt stripped. Naked. Humiliated. I wished Daniel were there. Not to fix it. He'd always said I was strong enough to stand on my own. But just to hold my hand, tell me I wasn't crazy, remind me I was loved. But the dead don't answer phones. And the living? Sometimes they cut deeper than any illness ever could. I didn't cry yet. Not there. Not where strangers could see. I took a slow breath, wiped my palms against my jeans, and stood. Anger replaced the shock. Quiet anger. The kind that settles deep rather than exploding. Emily thought I was powerless. She thought age had softened my spine, erased my instincts, dulled my memory. She didn't understand that women like me, women who survived decades of sacrifice, marriage, motherhood, bills, funerals, and disappointment, don't break. We bend. We absorb. We rise again. And I would rise now. I unlocked my phone. My fingers hovered for a second before tapping the name I'd avoided since Daniel's funeral. Marcus Whitaker. Our family lawyer. He picked up on the first ring. Linda? Everything all right? His voice was warm, steady, familiar, like a lighthouse in a storm. No, I said quietly. I think my daughter has done something. Something very wrong. He didn't ask me to explain over the phone. He simply said, with the patience of a man who had guided us through wills, deeds, medical directives, and grief, come to my office. Nah, I'll clear my schedule. And for the first time since Emily's call, I felt a tiny spark of strength light inside my chest. Emily believed she had taken everything from me. But she had no idea what her father left behind. No idea what secrets I'd kept. No idea that the woman she'd dismissed as a fragile, aging burden still had cards left to play. And I intended to play them all. Because if Emily was going to treat me like I was nothing, then she was about to learn exactly who her mother really was. Marcus Whitaker's office sat on the second floor of a red brick building downtown, the kind of place that still had brass doorknobs and carpets older than my daughter. I'd walked through those doors dozens of times with Daniel. When we bought the lake house, when we updated our wills, when we opened our joint investment account. Back then, I never paid attention to the documents, never cared about the numbers. Daniel handled all that. I trusted him the way a person trusts air. Quietly, instinctively, without question. But walking through that same door alone. After what Emily had done, it felt different. The receptionist, Paula, bless her heart, she'd been there longer than some marriages, looked up from her desk, eyes widening. Linda? Honey, are you all right? She asked, standing as though she expected me to collapse. I will be, I said, which was the closest thing I had to the truth. He's expecting me. She didn't ask another question, just ushered me down the hallway lined with framed degrees and plaques, each one testifying to the fact that Marcus had always been the smartest man in any room. His office door was open. He stood when I stepped inside. Linda, he said gently, sit down. Tell me what happened. I sank into the leather chair across from his desk. It squeaked under me, a small familiar sound that brought back memories of Daniel leaning back in that exact seat, cracking jokes about how Marcus charged by the smile. But there was no smiling now. My daughter, I began, and my voice surprised me. Raw tight like someone had sanded it down. Emily, she sold the lake house. And my Subaru. Without asking. Without hesitation. She took it all. Marcus didn't interrupt. He folded his hands, waiting. She called me this morning, I continued, and said she and Jason were leaving for Greece. Tomorrow. That the money was already transferred. As if it were her right. Marcus nodded slowly, steepling his fingers. And the property deed and car title. Did you sign anything recently? No, I said firmly. I haven't signed a thing since Daniel passed. Then she forged your signature, he said. Not surprised. Not shocked. Just resigned. As though he'd seen this kind of betrayal too many times to count. The words sank into me like cold water. Forgery. My daughter. My only child. It was one thing to make a selfish decision. It was another to step into criminal territory. I clenched my hands in my lap. My rings clicked together. Daniel's wedding band, which I still wore on a chain, felt heavier against my chest. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a thick black binder, one I'd never seen before. My name was printed on the spine in gold lettering. What's that? I asked. He placed it in front of me and opened it to the first page, sliding his reading glasses onto his nose. This, he said, is the complete estate portfolio your husband prepared before he passed. I blinked. Estate? Marcus, Daniel left some savings, the lake house, a few investments. No, he interrupted gently. Daniel left you far more than you believe. He turned another page. And another. And another. Line after line. Property deeds, investment accounts, trust funds, stocks, dividends, land parcels, rental units, unfolded before me like a magician pulling yards of fabric out of a hat. I stared. This apartment building, he said, tapping one of the entries, is the same one Emily and Jason have been living in for 8 years. Daniel bought it under an LLC, and the renter's payments have been deposited into your trust since 2013. My mouth fell open. Wait, you're telling me that building is mine? It always has been, he said. Daniel wanted to keep it quiet until his retirement, but when he fell ill, he asked me to secure everything for you. Quietly. Safely. I felt dizzy. Not because of the money, not exactly. But because my husband, the quiet man who never bragged, never boasted, never talked about finances in grand terms, had been building something monumental behind the scenes. And I had known none of it. You mean to say, I whispered, that Emily has been living for free all these years in my building? Yes. A humorless laugh escaped me. Sharp and disbelieving. And she still had the nerve, I said quietly, to steal from me. Marcus watched me with the patience of someone who understood grief in all its forms. Grief that comes from death, and grief that comes from betrayal. There's more, he said, turning to another section. I stared at the numbers typed neatly in black ink. 7 figures. Multiple accounts. A trust fund that Daniel had set to mature on my 75th birthday. Business shares I didn't even know he owned. Land purchased in Kentucky. A condo in Florida. A second trust that Emily was supposed to inherit at 40, if she met certain conditions. Conditions she had obliterated by today's actions. My head spun. Marcus, I said softly, why didn't you tell me all this sooner? He removed his glasses, setting them carefully on his desk. Because Daniel asked me not to. He worried grief would overwhelm you. He wanted you to heal before dealing with large assets. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. All those years I lived simply. Coupon clipping, choosing the cheaper medicine, putting off vacations, depriving myself of small indulgences, thinking we had only modest savings. Meanwhile, my husband had built a quiet empire. And my daughter, instead of supporting me, had nearly robbed me blind without even knowing the full scope of what she was trying to destroy. I feel like a fool, I murmured. You're not a fool, Marcus said. You're a mother. I swallowed hard. No truer words had ever been spoken. He slid a form across the desk. This will revoke Emily's power of attorney. Effective immediately. I didn't know she had power of attorney, I whispered. Your husband assigned her temporarily, only for medical emergencies, when he went into hospice. It was never meant to continue afterward, but paperwork was delayed, and then grief took over. That explained everything. She had access. She used it. She exploited it. I picked up the pen. For a moment, my hand shook. Not because I doubted the decision. No, that was clear as day. But because this signature symbolized something heavy. The severing of blind trust. The acknowledgement that my daughter was no longer the little girl who cried over scraped knees and clung to me during thunderstorms. She was a woman who saw her mother as an obstacle. I signed. Marcus nodded, collecting the document. There's one more thing we need to discuss, he said. Emily and Jason's plan to leave the country. My heart thudded. Should we stop them? I asked quietly. He considered this. Legally, we can freeze the accounts she transferred money into. The authorities will flag the transaction. They might be questioned upon arrival. I imagined Emily at the airport, her expensive suitcase beside her, irritated at the delay, tapping her foot impatiently while some officer asked her why funds appeared under suspicious circumstances. But I didn't want her arrested. I didn't want her ruined. I wanted her humbled. There's a difference. Don't have them stopped, I said finally. Let them go. Let them enjoy their little vacation. For however long the money lasts. Let her believe I'm the poor, helpless woman she thinks I am. Marcus leaned back. You're planning something, he said. I met his eyes. A small, cold smile pulled at my lips. Yes, I said. My daughter thinks she can take everything from me. But she's about to learn what real consequences look like. Not cruelty. Not revenge. Just a hard, honest lesson. Marcus didn't argue. He'd known me too long to mistake my calm for weakness. Very well, he said. I'll put everything into motion. Your accounts will be protected by tomorrow morning. The deeds will be transferred fully into your control. Emily won't have access to a penny. I exhaled slowly, the first deep breath I'd taken since that phone call. When I left the office, the sun was beginning to set, painting the buildings in a soft orange glow. I walked slowly, feeling lighter in body but heavier in heart. Halfway down the block, I stopped. For a moment, I let myself feel everything. The hurt. The betrayal. The shock. The quiet rage. The love that still lived in me despite all logic. Because no matter what she had done, she was still my daughter. But daughters must sometimes learn the cost of their choices. As I walked toward the bus stop, because I no longer had a car, I whispered something into the evening air. Daniel. I hope I'm doing the right thing. The wind stirred, cool against my skin. And I felt, just for a second, that my husband was with me. Guiding me. Steadying me. Because this was only the beginning. Emily didn't know it yet. But the world she had built so carelessly was about to crumble. Piece by piece. Truth by truth. And I, Linda Monroe, the mother she underestimated, would be the one to set the stage. If you've never ridden a public bus after sunset in Nashville, let me tell you, it humbles you real fast. The glow of streetlights flickering across the windows, the steady rattle of old engines, the mix of perfume, sweat, and fast food bags. It's a place where life strips itself bare. Nobody pretends on a bus. I hadn't ridden one since I was 22, back when Daniel and I scraped coins from the couch cushions for groceries. Riding it again at 71 felt like stepping into a faded photograph, one where the colors were familiar but slightly wrong. But I boarded that bus anyway, because my Subaru was gone, and because I wanted Emily to believe I was stranded. Powerless. Dependent. Everything she assumed me to be. The truth? She had taken my car. But she hadn't taken my dignity. And she certainly hadn't taken my mind. I slid into a hard plastic seat near the window. A teenager with purple hair chewed gum loudly beside me. Across the aisle, a mother rocked her baby to sleep, whispering soft prayers into his tiny ear. For a moment, my heart twisted. I remembered holding Emily like that, her head on my chest, her small fist curled around my shirt, her breath warm against my skin. I remembered promising myself I'd give her the world. And I did. Piece by piece. Year by year. Dollar by dollar. Sacrifice by sacrifice. It's strange how motherhood becomes muscle memory. Even after betrayal, even after heartbreak, my instinct was still to protect her. Still to hope for her. Still to love her more fiercely than I could explain. But love without boundaries becomes a leash others can pull. And Emily had yanked mine too hard. When I got home, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the walls echo. I hung my keys on the hook even though they didn't open anything anymore, then sat at the kitchen table in the dim glow of the stove light. I pulled out my phone. There were 2 messages from Emily. 1. Mom, hope you're okay. We're packing last minute. 2. By the way, Jason said the Subaru sold for a little less than expected, but we still made enough for the trip. Enough for their trip. Nothing about my transportation. Nothing about my independence. Nothing about the fact that the car they sold was my link to doctor appointments, grocery stores, church, and everyday life. I felt heat rise in my chest, Anger, sadness, disbelief. But I refused to reply. Not tonight. She needed to live in her own bubble for a while. She needed to think she'd gotten away with it. And then, life would start tugging at the seams. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a sheriff's deputy stood on the porch, holding a document. "Miss Monroe?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me a folded envelope. "This is regarding the transfer of your lake property. Standard notice. Have a good day, ma'am." My stomach twisted as I closed the door behind him. The house felt colder suddenly, like the betrayal had seeped into the walls. I opened the document. There it was. The forged signature. My name, written in sloppy loops I didn't recognize. I sat down on the couch. My hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with something deeper. A grief so hollow it echoed inside me. Emily hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't misunderstood anything. She had intentionally stolen from me. A mother's heart breaks in two ways. Once for the wound itself, and once for the child who inflicted it. I closed my eyes and pressed my palm to my chest. "Daniel," I whispered. "I hope you're watching. Because this is going to hurt." Later that afternoon, I went to Marcus's office again to finalize the freezing of every account Emily had touched. While his staff prepared the papers, I wandered the corridors, my footsteps soft against the faded carpet. When the final set of forms was in front of me, Marcus explained everything step by step. By tomorrow, Emily and Jason will find that the funds from the property sale have been legally reversed. Their accounts will show a hold. They won't be able to withdraw or spend a cent. I nodded. Not happily. Not triumphantly. Just firmly. "Let it stand," I said. "Don't notify them. Not yet. You want them to figure it out on their own." "I want reality to do the talking," I replied. Because lessons learned gently were often forgotten. But lessons learned harshly? Those lived forever. When the paperwork was done, Marcus hesitated before closing the folder. "There's one more matter, Linda," he said. "Daniel left something specifically for you to open only after Emily made her first major adult decision. He wanted it kept sealed until the moment felt right." My breath caught. "What is it?" Marcus unlocked a small file cabinet and pulled out a slim, cream-colored envelope with my name written in Daniel's handwriting. Steady, neat, unmistakably his. Seeing his handwriting again nearly buckled my knees. "Take your time," Marcus said softly. I held the envelope gently, sliding my finger under the flap like I was opening a fragile memory. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Daniel's letter. My heart hammered. I could almost hear his voice as I read. "My Linda, if you are reading this, it means our Emily has grown older, and life has brought you to a moment where you must stand strong without me. I know how you love, with your whole heart, without keeping score, without expecting anything in return. But I need you to remember something. You are not just a mother. You are a woman with worth, dignity, and a mind sharper than any blade. Our daughter. I worry she may grow entitled. She has lived comfortably. Too comfortably. If she ever forgets gratitude, or responsibility, or respect, you must guide her back. Not with anger, but with strength. I built these assets for you, not for her comfort. Use them wisely. Protect yourself first. Love her second. Teach her third. When the time is right, you'll know what to do. And Linda, don't doubt yourself. You were always the stronger one. Yours forever, Daniel." By the time I finished reading, my eyes were blurred. I held the letter to my heart as though I could absorb Daniel's steadiness through the paper. "It's like he knew," I whispered. Marcus nodded. He predicted she might struggle with boundaries. Struggle was a polite word. Emily had bulldozed boundaries like they were weeds. But Daniel's words centered me. He wasn't telling me to punish her. He wasn't telling me to cut her off. He was telling me to teach her, guide her, help her find herself again. And I intended to do exactly that. That night, I packed a small overnight bag, not for travel, but because I felt an urge to leave the house, to breathe fresh air somewhere that didn't hold echoes of betrayal. I stayed at a modest motel on the edge of town. Peeling wallpaper, buzzing lights, a bedspread too scratchy to be comfortable, but it gave me space. Quiet. Distance. From that room, I watched updates roll in. At 4:13 a.m., I received the first real sign that the consequences had begun. A message from Emily. Mom, are you awake? Something weird is happening with the bank. I didn't reply. At 4:21 a.m., our cards got declined at the airport cafe. I think the bank is glitching. At 4:38 a.m., Mom? Call me. This is serious. I felt a pang. Not satisfaction, but confirmation. The first crack in her certainty. The first shift in her reality. The beginning of understanding that money doesn't come from thin air, and that choices carry weight. At 5:02 a.m. They won't let us board. They're saying the funds look fraudulent. Mom, please answer. I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. Not out of cruelty. Not out of revenge. But because she needed to sit in the stillness she'd forced on me. She needed to feel uncertainty. She needed to face herself. Tomorrow, I would answer. Tomorrow, I would be a mother again. But tonight? Tonight, I would rest. Gather strength. Let the universe speak for me. Because the storm had only just begun. And Emily had no idea that the woman she believed was powerless had just taken back her entire life. I don't know how long I sat in my recliner that afternoon, holding that old envelope like it might explode in my hands. My mind kept looping back to the same thought. Daniel hid all of this from me. Not out of secrecy or mistrust, I knew. Daniel wasn't a secretive man. He was a protector. He probably thought he was sparing me from stress, paperwork, decisions. He'd always said, Linda, you take care of the heart, I'll handle the heavy lifting. Apparently, the heavy lifting included millions of dollars, for properties, and investments that could buy half of Charleston. I should have felt angry with him, but all I felt was a strange mix of grief and gratitude. Like he'd reached out from wherever he was and put a warm hand on my back, saying, It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. Still, knowing something is one thing. Doing something about it is another. I finally pushed myself up, grabbed my keys, and headed downtown, parked in front of Samuel Price's law office. I marched inside like a woman who had nothing left to lose, which, in a way, was the first true step toward gaining everything back. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses and dark curls, looked up. Can I help you, ma'am? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to see attorney Samuel Price. He handled my late husband Daniel's estate. Samuel looked up from his desk, sharp and professional, yet with eyes that held warmth. Linda Monroe? He asked, almost surprised. Yes, I said. I found something that tells me Daniel trusted you with a lot more than I ever knew. He gestured to a chair. Please sit. I wondered when you'd come. I sank down and held the envelope tightly in my lap. Samuel opened it carefully and began scanning the documents inside. His eyes moving quickly but with that practiced calm that comes from dealing with fortunes, trusts, and family estates for decades. It's all still valid, he said finally. The properties, the accounts, the investments. Everything. The largest asset, the apartment complex Emily has been living in, Palmetto Ridge, is under your name in a trust. I've kept it operating according to Daniel's instructions. I felt a chill. Emily lives there? Yes, he said. She's been paying rent, but under the terms of your husband's trust, all the payments have been deposited into your accounts for years. I let out a sharp laugh. More disbelief than amusement. So she's been living in my property all this time? Samuel nodded. Exactly. I felt a mix of astonishment and a cold, simmering anger. Emily had been brazen enough to sell the lake house and my car, thinking she could take anything she wanted, and she didn't even realize the building she lived in had been mine all along. Samuel leaned back. There's more. He flipped through the rest of the documents. Several investment accounts, trust funds maturing over time, properties in Florida, land in Kentucky. All fully in your name. Your husband wanted to secure your future independently, knowing that grief and family dynamics could get complicated. My hands were trembling, and I realized I had been holding my breath. All these years. I thought we had so little. And Emily, she had no idea what she was touching, did she? Samuel shook his head. No idea. But legally, you can reclaim everything immediately. We can also restrict her access to any accounts she may have used inappropriately. I exhaled slowly. Then let's do that. Quietly. No confrontation. No announcements. You want her to discover it herself? He asked. Yes, I said firmly. She needs to understand consequences without me punishing her. Not revenge, but accountability. He nodded, impressed with my clarity. Understood. Everything will be transferred to your control by tomorrow morning. Emily won't have access to a penny. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The legal part was done, but the emotional part was just beginning. Emily didn't know yet, but soon she would. And when she came back from her European adventure, empty-handed or humbled by circumstance, she would finally understand what responsibility meant. Samuel hesitated, then pulled a smaller envelope from the drawer. There's something else your husband left for you to open. Only after he felt the timing was right. I held the envelope in my hands, feeling Daniel's handwriting as if he had pressed it there himself. Carefully, I opened it. Inside was a letter. My Linda. If you are reading this, it means Emily has reached an age where she must face consequences, and you are ready to take back control. I know how fiercely you love, with your whole heart, without keeping score. Our daughter. She may grow entitled. She may not see the value of what she has been given. You must guide her, not with anger, but with firm, steady strength. I built these assets for you, not for her comfort. Use them wisely. Protect yourself first. Love her second. Teach her third. Don't doubt yourself. You are always stronger than you believe. Forever yours, Daniel. I clutched the letter to my chest. His words weren't just instructions. They were a reminder that I had a backbone stronger than Emily had ever tested. That I had the right to stand tall, even if it meant letting my own daughter stumble. That night, I didn't answer Emily's texts. She had been calling and messaging non-stop about the funds she transferred. Panic creeping through her messages as she realized something was wrong. Mom, are you awake? Something's wrong with the bank. Our cards got declined at the airport. What's happening? Mom. Call me now. This is serious. I ignored them all. Not cruelty. Not spite. But because she needed to sit in the discomfort she'd never faced before. By morning, the transfers were complete. Every account back under my control. Every property secured. And every financial step I took would soon teach Emily the lesson she desperately needed. That life isn't about entitlement, and wealth without responsibility is fragile. Even as I drove the bus to run errands, yes, riding the bus again after all these years, letting Emily believe I had no means, I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. Not from revenge, but from justice tempered with love. Emily had thought she had taken everything from me. She hadn't even scratched the surface. And when she returned, she would discover a truth that would shake her deeply. The mother she underestimated was, in reality, the one who always had the power, and always would. And for the first time in days, I slept knowing that I wasn't powerless. I was preparing. Waiting. Watching. And Emily. Emily was about to learn what consequences really meant. I didn't hear from Emily for nearly a week after that. Not a single text. Not a call. I imagined her in Europe, somewhere in Greece or Italy, George at her side, cocktail in hand, luxury hotel room, thinking she had it all figured out. The way young people do when they've never had to face real responsibility. And yet, there was a gnawing sensation in me. Not anxiety. More like anticipation. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall is coming, and bracing to catch someone mid-air. On the 7th day, my phone buzzed early in the morning. A single, frantic text from Emily. Mom. Something's wrong. George, he's gone. The trip. Everything. I don't know what to do. My chest tightened. Not fear for her, she would survive, but concern for what was coming next. She didn't know it yet, but the little financial safety net she believed she had was gone. The accounts she thought were hers? Frozen. The lake house? Sold under legal authority back to me. Her luxury vacation? Over before it really began. I didn't reply. I let her panic do the work I knew it would. By the time I did finally answer, a day later, her texts had piled up like a storm surge. Mom, call me. I'm stranded. George disappeared. The hotel won't let me pay. I have no money. I don't even know how to get to the airport. I'm stuck here. Please, Mom, help me. I read each one carefully, then put my phone down. I wasn't going to save her. Not immediately. She had to taste the consequences of her actions. Only then would she understand that life isn't a series of entitlement checks. Instead, I made a plan. I contacted Samuel first, instructing him to remain discreet. Every account, every asset, every transfer, Emily had zero access. She could learn the hard way that the money she had assumed would be there was gone. Next, I contacted a property manager in Europe, a local friend who could monitor Emily without alerting her to my involvement. I didn't need her to know I was watching. She needed to navigate the chaos alone first. And chaos she found. By the time Emily reached the hotel front desk, she discovered that George had, apparently, taken the emergency fund she kept in their shared wallet. Her room had been booked under his name, and he had vanished with the card. The receptionist shook her head at her frantic requests. Sorry, madam. Payment declined. We cannot release the room until funds are verified. Emily called me in tears. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable. Mom, I don't know what to do. George, he left me. The hotel won't. I'm stuck. I don't have anything. What am I supposed to do? I sat on the couch, holding my chin. I could feel the weight of every decision she'd made. The lies, the manipulations, the callousness toward me. And I thought of Daniel's letter again. Protect yourself first. Love her second. Teach her third. I whispered to the empty room. She's about to learn, Daniel. She's about to learn. Over the next few days, Emily's situation deteriorated rapidly. The credit cards she assumed were unlimited were frozen. Hotels refused service without upfront cash. Restaurants denied her entry when George tried to pay and the cards bounced. Even basic transportation became a nightmare. Her messages to me turned from frantic cries for help to pleading, then to quiet desperation. Mom, I have no choice. I'm selling some of my things here to get cash. I don't even know if it'll be enough. I don't deserve your help. I see that now. I didn't respond immediately. I watched her flounder, not out of cruelty, but because sometimes the greatest lessons require silence. Meanwhile, I made subtle preparations for what would come next. I instructed Samuel to maintain control of Palmetto Ridge, ensuring that Emily would have to face consequences for her decisions when she returned. I also instructed him to begin the process of eviction notices for any late or unpaid rent, discreetly under normal procedures, so she would feel the real weight of responsibility. I thought of her as a bird who had flown too far from the nest, thinking it could survive without wings. She would have to learn the hard way. I spent that week quietly checking in on her indirectly. A text from a friend in Athens confirmed she was walking long hours through the city streets, carrying a small bag, begging small loans from strangers, waiting in lines for food she could barely afford. My heart ached, but in the way a parent's heart aches when a child learns something vital on their own. At one point, I found myself smiling quietly. Not because she was suffering, but because she was finally experiencing life outside privilege. She was seeing what it meant to be responsible, to struggle, to rely on her own wits. Emily would come back different. That, I knew instinctively. By the end of the week, her messages grew more reflective, less frantic. Mom, I hate myself for being so reckless. I didn't think. I thought I was invincible. I see now that I was wrong. George, he's gone. I have nothing. I'm scared, but I think I understand now. I don't want to rely on anyone else like that again. I let those words sit. I didn't answer. I wanted her to feel that silence as part of the lesson, the emptiness left by consequences. Meanwhile, I made my own preparations at home. The lake house was under my control. Palmetto Ridge's leases and accounts were secured. Investments were untouched. Everything that Daniel had built for me remained intact. But the true lesson, one that no money could teach, was about to be delivered in person when Emily returned. And I would be ready. I spent my evenings planning subtly for her arrival, arranging bills she would face, creating scenarios that would teach humility, and setting boundaries she could not ignore. It wasn't revenge. It was instruction. It was love tempered with reality. When Emily finally boarded her flight back, exhausted and empty-handed, she would enter a world she had thought she knew. But now the rules had changed. The mother she underestimated would be waiting, calm and prepared, ready to guide her back to responsibility. And for the first time, I felt the strange exhilaration of control. Not over wealth, not over property, but over the shaping of a young woman's understanding of life. Emily didn't know it yet, but her journey had only just begun. Emily finally arrived home, her flight delayed, her face pale and eyes hollowed from exhaustion. I waited at the airport, but not at the baggage claim or near the exit. I stayed in the car a short distance away, watching her struggle with her small suitcase and oversized carry-on. George was nowhere in sight, of course. He had disappeared like a shadow, leaving her with nothing but reality. When she finally spotted me, relief and confusion collided on her face. She ran toward the car, and I opened the door, letting her collapse into the passenger seat. She smelled of airport air, cheap hotel laundry detergent, and fatigue. Mom, she started, but I held up a finger, gently stopping her. Shoo, I said. Drive. Just drive home. She obeyed. Wordless. Normally, Emily's voice would have been loud, demanding, arguing, even pleading. But this time, she was quiet. The silence alone said more than 1,000 lectures could. On the way home, she kept glancing at me, a mix of fear and curiosity. I let her stew. The moment wasn't about words. It was about comprehension. Emily needed to feel the weight of her choices before she could even form questions. At the house, I had already prepared the first lesson. A pile of unopened bills sat neatly on the kitchen table. Notices for late payments, overdue charges, and small debts accumulated over her European escapade had arrived in my absence. Normally, I would have quietly taken care of them, shielded her from stress. Not this time. Mom, she whispered, staring at the pile. Her hands shook. Yes, Emily. Those are yours, I said calmly. You'll handle them. Her face paled further. I don't even have any money. George, he took everything. I can't. Exactly, I said softly. You can't. Not anymore. You have to learn the value of responsibility. You have to work for it. You have to understand that nothing comes without effort. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and I fought the urge to hug her immediately. I wanted her to feel the sting, the humility, before comfort arrived. Her first week back was rough. I directed her to the local cleaning service I had once volunteered at. Not a fancy office job, not a cushy internship, just a low-paying, grueling cleaning position where Emily learned that money isn't free and respect is earned. The first day, she struggled to lift mops, scrub floors, and handle harsh cleaning chemicals. She groaned with every bucket of water she carried, cursed under her breath at stains she couldn't remove, and for the first time, faced real fatigue. At night, she would collapse in her small room in the lake house, exhausted and humbled. She texted me, but her messages were different now. Apologetic, reflective, sincere. Mom, I never knew it would be like this. I'm sorry. I thought money and freedom were everything. I see now I was wrong. I responded minimally. Not praise. Not scolding. Just silent observation. The lessons were for her to internalize, not for me to narrate. Meanwhile, Palmetto Ridge's property manager, Kyle, began implementing normal tenant procedures. Any missed payment notices or maintenance fees were sent as they would be for any tenant. Emily had no exemptions. When she struggled to pay, she had to negotiate, make sacrifices, and face real consequences. I watched discreetly, my heart aching and swelling simultaneously. She sold some family jewelry, not sentimental pieces I had hidden away, but small heirlooms she thought were hers, to cover her debts. She started to understand the value of even a single dollar, the way sweat and compromise underpin survival. During this time, I began to share small truths with her. Not lectures, but stories. I told her about my own struggles after Daniel passed, about how I had navigated life without his guidance. I described the times when I had to make impossible choices, how I felt fear, doubt, and despair, but still survived. One night, she asked softly, voice barely above a whisper, Mom, why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you just give me money? I looked at her, really looked at her. The young woman who had once been spoiled by convenience, the girl who had taken everything for granted. I touched her hand gently. Because Emily, I said, life doesn't hand lessons on silver platters. You have to earn understanding. You have to feel it. I wanted you to come back alive. Not just wealthy. I wanted you to come back wiser. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I get it now. I really do. The transformation was slow, not instant. Emily still grumbled about chores, still struggled with exhaustion, but the spark of awareness was there. She began to take initiative, fixing small things around the house, preparing meals, and handling bills with guidance rather than complaining. I also began including her in conversations about Palmetto Ridge, tenant concerns, maintenance issues, budget reports. Not as an owner, not as someone with entitlement, but as someone learning responsibility. Her questions became thoughtful, her observations intelligent, and I felt pride bloom quietly in my chest. One evening, she came to me with a plan she had drafted herself, a budget for her wages, a repayment plan for the jewelry she had sold, and a schedule for her cleaning shifts. She looked at me nervously. Mom, I want to do this right. I want to fix what I've done. I smiled softly. You're learning, Emily. That's all anyone can ask. By the end of her first month back, Emily had begun to see the consequences of impulsive decisions, the fragility of wealth, and the importance of family. She had learned that dependence is easy, independence is hard, and that humility is priceless. I didn't tell her how proud I was. Not yet. Pride would come later, once she truly internalized the lessons. For now, observation and silent support were enough. And I could see it, the girl who had left for Europe, confident and entitled, returning home weary, humbled, but willing to rebuild. The transformation had begun. But even as I watched her grow, I knew the journey was far from over. There were still debts to settle, responsibilities to teach, and personal failures to confront. Emily's character was reshaping itself under pressure, but the final proof would come only with time, consistency, and real-world consequences. And I, Linda Monroe, was ready to guide her through every step. Not as a controlling mother, but as a steady hand, a mirror for her own mistakes, and a living example of how resilience, patience, and wisdom can shape a life. Emily didn't know it yet, but the hardest, most meaningful lessons were still ahead. Emily's days became a rhythm of labor, reflection, and quiet learning. I watched from a distance, careful not to interfere, yet always ready to guide when she asked. She was no longer the girl who assumed the world owed her something. The girl who had left for Europe with George's promises was gone. In her place was someone raw, humbled, and slowly rebuilding herself. The first few weeks, she struggled to adapt to the cleaning job. Floors, bathrooms, and kitchens that seemed endless, the constant bending and scrubbing, the heavy buckets of water. It was exhausting work, both physically and mentally. At night, she would come home with blisters on her hands, aching muscles, and a fatigue that no luxury hotel had ever given her. I never offered her a shortcut. Every night, she would slump into the couch, staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. You're learning the value of effort, I said one evening, as she sat silently after a long day. She looked up, her eyes red but alert. I didn't think it would feel like this. I thought I could just work a few hours and pay off everything. I didn't understand how hard it is to actually earn money. You never had to, I said gently. You've always had me, George, convenience. But now you know something different. Real life doesn't work that way. Emily nodded, her expression a mix of shame and determination. For the first time, she admitted mistakes without excuses. I could feel a shift happening inside her. Meanwhile, the Palmetto Ridge property manager, Kyle, continued to process her lease like any other tenant. Notices for overdue payments were sent, maintenance requests required her attention, and minor penalties for late fees were applied. Emily could no longer assume that her life would bend around her whims. She had to navigate consequences like any responsible adult. One afternoon, she called me, voice shaky but firm. Mom, they're saying my rent isn't enough this month. I don't have the money. Then you negotiate, Emily, I said. Find a solution. Don't wait for someone else to fix your problems. She swallowed hard. Okay. I'll figure it out. By evening, she had managed to contact Kyle, negotiate a temporary plan, and even found a small second-hand part-time gig delivering groceries to help cover the shortfall. I listened as she recounted her day, amazed at her resourcefulness. You handled that beautifully, I told her. See what you can do when you stop relying on others? Emily smiled, faintly, but there was a new fire in her eyes. a mixture of humility and self-reliance. At home, I started involving her in the household responsibilities more intentionally. We cooked together, cleaned, managed the bills, and organized schedules. Every task, no matter how small, became a lesson in diligence and accountability. Emily began to see how effortless some of her previous life had been, and how fragile luxury could be without effort to maintain it. One evening, she found a photo album of our family vacations. Photos from her childhood, her father Daniel, and me. She paused at each picture, touching the images softly. "Mom, I didn't realize how much we sacrificed for each other," she whispered. I took everything for granted." I placed my hand on hers. "It's okay, Emily. You're learning now. That's what matters. Life isn't about possessions. It's about understanding, responsibility, and respect. You're beginning to see that." Emily's transformation was not without setbacks. She had moments of frustration, bursts of impatience, and occasional self-pity. But I refused to shield her from these moments. Instead, I let her experience them fully, then guided her to reflect. "You're frustrated because you want things to be easy," I said one afternoon, as she slammed a broom into a corner. "But life isn't easy. That's why perseverance matters. That's why integrity matters." She nodded, catching her breath. "I know. I feel like I'm so far behind." "You're not behind, Emily," I said softly. "You're learning lessons that most people never have to learn until much later. And you'll be stronger for it." Her evenings now included quiet journaling, writing down what she had accomplished, what she struggled with, and what she hoped to improve. The act of reflecting became a powerful tool in her transformation. I occasionally peeked at her notes, careful not to pry too deeply, but enough to see that the lessons were sinking in. The cleaning job continued to be demanding, yet Emily's approach changed. She began to take pride in her work, completing tasks efficiently, asking questions to improve her methods, and even mentoring other young employees when they struggled. A sense of humility combined with competence was beginning to shine through her demeanor. At home, I also introduced subtle lessons about money management. I gave her a modest weekly allowance to manage, forcing her to budget for food, transportation, and small personal needs. She quickly learned how quickly money could disappear and how careful planning was essential. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, she looked up at me. "Mom, I never realized how much work goes into everything. From running a house, to managing bills, to keeping people happy. I thought I was ready to be independent, but I wasn't even close." "That's the point, Emily," I said, smiling. "Independence isn't a gift. It's earned. And humility is the foundation. You're starting to build it." Her voice cracked slightly. I'm so sorry for taking everything for granted. For selling the house, for thinking money was all that mattered, for George. I was blind." "You're learning," I said. "That's all anyone can ask. Lessons are meant to be lived, not just spoken." As days turned into weeks, Emily's growth became more evident. Her confidence was no longer based on entitlement, but on competence. Her patience increased, her judgment sharpened, and she began to appreciate the stability I had always provided, not as something owed to her, but as a gift that required respect. One morning, she came into the kitchen with a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. "For you, Mom," she said softly. I want to thank you for everything." I accepted them, touched by the gesture, but I didn't praise her overly. "You're learning, Emily. That's what matters. Keep going." And she did. Every day brought small victories, quiet realizations, and tangible growth. She began to understand that life's true richness isn't measured in money, possessions, or convenience. It's measured in character, effort, and respect. Emily was becoming the woman Daniel and I had always hoped she could be. Not spoiled, not entitled, not dependent, but resilient, capable, and compassionate. And though the road ahead remained long, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Because I knew, the foundation had been laid, and Emily was finally walking the path she needed to walk, under her own power, guided by lessons learned through struggle, reflection, and love. By the time Emily entered her second month back home, the weight of her choices was fully settling in. She no longer expected anything to be easy, no longer assumed that money or charm could erase mistakes. The luxury she had chased in Europe with George had been replaced with the reality of bills, work, and self-reliance. One morning, she came into the kitchen looking tired, her hair mussed and eyes heavy, carrying a small notebook. "Mom, I think I need to plan everything," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. I gestured for her to sit. "Planning is good, Emily. What's in your notebook?" She opened it, showing a detailed list: rent, utilities, groceries, small debts from Europe, and the repayment for the jewelry she had sold. Below that, she had a weekly cleaning schedule, a budget for transportation, and even a plan to save a small emergency fund. I studied it carefully. "This is impressive," I said softly. "You're thinking long-term. That's maturity." Her shoulders relaxed slightly at the praise, but there was still tension in her eyes. I never realized how complicated it is. I thought earning a little money would cover everything, but it doesn't. Nothing does, unless you plan and work for it. "Exactly," I said. "Life rewards preparation and effort, not expectation or entitlement." That week, I introduced her to another subtle lesson. I asked her to help with Palmetto Ridge's tenant issues, not as a visitor, but as someone learning responsibility. She handled calls from tenants, took note of maintenance requests, and even mediated small disputes. Watching her work carefully, with patience and consideration, I realized she was absorbing lessons faster than I had expected. One afternoon, a tenant called complaining about a plumbing leak. Emily listened patiently, asked the right questions, and calmly noted the issue for repair. She hung up and turned to me. "Mom, I think I understand now. Being in charge isn't about telling people what to do. It's about listening, planning, and following through." I nodded, feeling a swell of pride. Exactly. Leadership and responsibility are earned through diligence, patience, and understanding. Her European debts were slowly being addressed through her cleaning job earnings and careful budgeting. Each payment she made felt like a small victory, reinforcing her newfound respect for money, effort, and consequence. Then came the day she walked in, holding a thick envelope, looking both anxious and proud. "Mom, this is from Europe. It's everything I have left." I took it carefully. Inside were receipts, bank statements, and a small sum of cash, the remainder of her trip funds after being stranded, abandoned by George, and facing hotel and travel charges. "You see, Emily," I said gently, "this is the reality of your choices. You can either use this experience as a lesson or let it define you negatively. You have the power to transform it." Her eyes filled with tears. "I want to transform it, Mom. I don't want to be selfish or careless ever again." Over the next few weeks, she began taking more responsibility at home. She helped with cooking, cleaning, and errands without being asked. She began budgeting meticulously, saving for emergencies, and even found a small side gig tutoring children in math. Each act, no matter how small, reinforced the lesson she had been learning since her return. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the lake, she turned to me with a hesitant smile. "Mom, I never realized how much work it takes to manage a household, to manage life. I always thought it was effortless for you, and I took that for granted." I took her hand gently. "Emily, it's never effortless. But effort is rewarding. And now you know what it feels like to earn, struggle, and succeed. That understanding, that humility, is the real treasure." Her growth was becoming evident not just in her actions, but in her demeanor. She was more patient, more reflective, and more considerate. Even the cleaning job, which she once dreaded, became a source of pride. She realized that dignity comes from doing things well, regardless of status or recognition. Then came the first true test. A letter arrived from the bank regarding a debt incurred during her European adventure. The amount was significant, and she knew that ignoring it would have consequences. "Mom, I have to deal with this," she said, her voice steady but nervous. "Yes," I said. "And you will. Face it directly, responsibly. That's how you grow." Over the next few days, she worked tirelessly to communicate with the bank, negotiate payment plans, and even use some of her savings to cover part of the debt. Every interaction was a lesson in accountability and perseverance. By the end of the week, she had successfully arranged a manageable repayment schedule. I watched her, quietly proud. She was no longer the impulsive, entitled girl who had left for Europe thinking she could manipulate life into giving her what she wanted. She had been humbled, faced consequences, and was actively taking steps to rebuild herself. One evening, as we shared a quiet dinner, she looked at me earnestly. Mom, I don't want to ever take what you or Dad built for granted again. I want to do something meaningful with my life. I smiled softly, feeling the truth of her words. And you will, Emily. You've already started. The lessons you've learned, the responsibility you're embracing, and the humility you've gained will guide you. You can turn this experience into something extraordinary. Emily nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. I want to help others, Mom. Maybe those who are struggling like I was, who don't know how to manage their lives or finances or responsibilities. Her words filled me with a quiet, profound pride. She had begun the transformation that Daniel and I had hoped for. Not just learning about money, possessions, or status, but understanding the value of responsibility, empathy, and hard work. And as she cleaned the kitchen later that night, meticulously organizing dishes and wiping surfaces with care, I realized she had internalized a truth that no lecture or argument could have taught. Real wealth isn't measured in money or property. It's measured in character, integrity, and the strength to rise from one's own mistakes. Emily had come a long way, but I knew the journey wasn't over. There were still lessons to impart, still challenges to face, and still consequences to understand fully. But for the first time, I saw the light of transformation in her. A young woman no longer blinded by entitlement, now guided by humility, responsibility, and the quiet strength of experience. And I knew without a doubt that when she faced the next challenge, she would meet it with resilience, awareness, and the wisdom she had begun to cultivate. By the 9th week since Emily returned, her transformation had become more visible each day. The girl who had boarded a plane to Europe with George, thinking she could take the world by storm, was now a woman learning the weight of her choices. She rose early, managed her cleaning job, handled household duties, and worked tirelessly on her small tutoring side gig. But this week brought a challenge unlike any she had faced so far. A letter arrived from a collection agency in the mail. A harsh reminder of her European debts. The notice was stern and formal, warning that failure to pay could result in legal action. She stared at the envelope for several long minutes, her hands shaking slightly. I don't know how I'll manage this, Mom, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Emily, you've already faced harder days than this. You know what to do. You've learned to plan, to budget, to work. This is no different. She nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. For the first time, she understood the full scope of her actions. How impulsive decisions could create a ripple effect that followed her long after the moment had passed. The following days were intense. Emily meticulously combed through her finances, reviewing every payment, every receipt, every remaining resource. She prioritized debt repayment, allocated her cleaning wages carefully, and even negotiated small extensions with the agency. Each step required patience, diligence, and communication skills she had never needed before. Late one afternoon, she came to me with tears in her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I think I finally understand. Not just about money but everything. Responsibility, respect, hard work. I never realized how much I relied on others to fix my mistakes. I smiled softly, feeling a deep swell of pride. You're learning, Emily. That understanding, the humility to recognize mistakes and the strength to correct them, is worth more than any fortune or luxury you ever sought. But the week wasn't over, and life had one more lesson in store for her. The small tutoring job she had begun for extra income ran into an unexpected challenge. A parent complained about a scheduling conflict, leaving her uncertain about her future with the children. She sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands, overwhelmed by worry. Mom, I can't handle this. I feel like everything I try to fix keeps falling apart. I knelt beside her, placing my hands over hers. Emily, you've been facing challenges every day since your return. You've been humbled, you've learned, you've worked hard. Life isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. You adjust, you adapt, you keep moving forward. That's the difference between a person who grows and a person who stagnates. She took a deep breath, wiping tears from her cheeks. I understand, Mom. I have to keep going. Even when it's hard. Even when I fail. Exactly, I thought. That was the heart of it, the lesson that Daniel and I had hoped she would learn. Resilience in the face of adversity, integrity in decision-making, and patience in rebuilding one's life. Over the next several days, Emily faced small victories that reinforced these lessons. She solved the tutoring conflict with the parent gracefully, restructured her cleaning schedule for greater efficiency, and even began mentoring a new employee at the cleaning service, quietly teaching what she had learned. Each success, though modest, built her confidence and reinforced her sense of responsibility. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, she spoke softly. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I hurt myself. I took things for granted, and I thought the world owed me. I don't know how to fix all the damage I caused, but I want to try." I looked at her, seeing the truth in her eyes. "Emily, the damage isn't irreparable. You've already begun to fix it, not with words, but with actions. You've humbled yourself, you've worked hard, and you've learned. That's more than most people ever do." Tears fell freely from her cheeks. "I wish I could undo everything. The house, the car, George. I was so selfish." "You cannot undo the past," I said gently. "But you can shape the future. And that's exactly what you're doing." She nodded, wiping her face, a quiet determination replacing her despair. "I want to help others. Not just for myself, but for people who might make the same mistakes I did. I want to turn my experience into something meaningful." That night, I watched her work quietly in her room, drafting plans for a small community project to assist struggling youth, teaching financial literacy, responsibility, and accountability. I knew she had finally internalized the lesson I had hoped for all along. That true wealth isn't money or property, but character, empathy, and the ability to rise from one's mistakes. The next morning, she came down with a small smile. "Mom, I've thought about what you said. About responsibility, integrity, and patience. I want to keep this mindset, even after everything is settled. I don't want to go back to being careless or entitled." "You've already proven that, Emily," I said softly. "You've faced consequences, you've worked, and you've learned. Keep moving forward, and you'll continue to grow." Her transformation was no longer tentative. It was becoming permanent. I could see it in her posture, her demeanor, and the care she took in everything she did. She was no longer the girl who had sold the house and car for a European fantasy. She was a young woman building her own future, learning from every misstep, and embracing responsibility with humility. And as I watched her quietly, I realized that the final test of her growth would come soon. The moment when she fully understood that forgiveness, compassion, and self-awareness were as important as accountability and hard work. Emily was ready for that moment, and I, Linda Monroe, would guide her gently but firmly, ensuring that the lessons she had learned would never be forgotten. The morning Emily awoke, she carried with her a sense of quiet determination I hadn't seen in months. The weeks of hard work, reflection, and humility had begun to solidify into a character I could recognize. Not the spoiled, entitled girl who had left for Europe with George, but a young woman who had faced her mistakes and was ready to build something meaningful from them. I watched her from the kitchen doorway as she prepared breakfast, moving efficiently yet carefully, taking pride in each task. She had even begun to organize our home's finances alongside me, tracking bills, calculating expenses, and planning ahead for the weeks to come. "Mom," she said softly, placing a tray on the table, "I've been thinking. I want to start giving back. I want to use what I've learned to help others, so they don't make the same mistakes I did." I smiled, touched by her sincerity. "That's wonderful, Emily. That's the lesson I hoped you'd carry forward. The understanding that responsibility, humility, and hard work are not just personal virtues, but tools to uplift others as well." Her first initiative was modest but meaningful. She drafted a plan for a small mentorship program aimed at teens and young adults struggling with poor financial habits or impulsive decisions. Essentially those who, like her, needed guidance before it was too late. I listened as she described her vision, her ideas, and her plans for workshops, tutoring, and one-on-one coaching. Her enthusiasm was tempered by maturity now. She wasn't seeking recognition, only impact. Meanwhile, I had quietly taken care of the final administrative pieces. The debts incurred during her European adventure had been resolved through the repayment plan she had executed herself, with the last of the collection letters marked, "Paid in full." I ensured all notices regarding Palmetto Ridge were properly settled. She had faced the consequences, learned from them, and now she was free from financial burdens, though she didn't yet know that I had overseen the last steps. When I finally told her, she was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing her mentorship plan. "Emily," I began, placing a hand on her shoulder, "everything you feared losing, the debts, the bills, the uncertainty, you've already handled. You've paid every debt you could, negotiated responsibly, and learned the value of your actions. I took care of the remainder quietly. You earned this lesson, and now you can move forward without the burden. Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached out, hugging me tightly. Mom, I thank you. I don't even know how to express what I feel. I was so selfish, so blind. You taught me more than I could have ever imagined. You've learned, Emily, I said softly. And that's what matters. Lessons learned through experience are never forgotten. Now you can take that understanding and use it to help others, as you planned. Over the next several months, Emily dedicated herself to her mentorship program. She continued her cleaning job and tutoring, but she also began volunteering at local shelters, organizing workshops for teens on financial literacy, personal responsibility, and goal setting. The young woman who had once sought wealth and luxury now sought purpose, empathy, and meaningful contribution. Our relationship shifted as well. We went from cautious and strained interactions to collaboration and shared purpose. We spent hours together discussing shelter programs, planning workshops, and coordinating community events. Each day, our bond strengthened, built not on dependency or expectation, but on mutual respect, understanding, and shared goals. One afternoon, while sorting donations for the shelter, Emily looked up at me with a soft smile. Mom, do you remember the lake house? The one I sold for that trip? I nodded. I want to do something with it. Not just for us, not for luxury, but for people who need it. A shelter, a safe place, a home for women and children who are struggling, like I struggled. I felt a surge of pride. That's a beautiful idea, Emily. It's meaningful, compassionate, and practical. Let's do it together. Over the following months, we worked tirelessly to turn the lake house into a shelter for abused and neglected women. Emily took the lead on community outreach, organizing donations, and designing programs for residents. I oversaw logistics, legal requirements, and property management. Together, we transformed a space once symbolic of wealth and entitlement into a haven of hope, empowerment, and support. The transformation in Emily was profound. She had grown from a reckless, self-absorbed young woman into a compassionate, responsible, and empathetic adult. She had experienced failure, learned humility, and developed a work ethic that carried beyond personal gain. Every small success reinforced her understanding that true wealth is measured not in money, possessions, or status, but in character, empathy, and the ability to make a difference. One quiet evening, after a long day of coordinating donations and mentoring programs, Emily sat beside me on the porch. The sun was setting over the lake, casting a warm glow over the house that had once been the center of her recklessness. Mom, she said softly, I don't think I would have become this person if I hadn't faced everything I did. Losing money, facing hardships, feeling fear. I understand now. I want to be someone who makes a difference, who helps people, who doesn't take anything for granted. I placed my hand over hers, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and love. Emily, you've learned what most people only realize after decades. You've taken responsibility, embraced humility, and chosen purpose over convenience. That's the life worth living. Tears welled in her eyes, and she leaned against me. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For guiding me, for letting me learn, and for believing in me even when I didn't deserve it. You deserve the lesson, Emily, I said gently. And you've earned the woman you've become. Now, let's use what we've learned together to make the world a little better. And so we did. Together, mother and daughter rebuilt not just a house, but a legacy. Emily became a mentor, a guide, and a compassionate advocate for those who needed it most. I continued to watch, quietly proud, knowing that the lessons of responsibility, humility, and perseverance had taken root. The lake house, once a symbol of wealth taken for granted, became a beacon of hope. Emily, once reckless and entitled, had become wise, empathetic, and purposeful. And our bond, tested, strained, and refined through hardship, emerged stronger than ever, grounded in mutual respect, shared goals, and the understanding that true wealth is measured not in what we have, but in who we become. We had begun a new chapter together, not defined by mistakes or material wealth, but by growth, compassion, and the meaningful work of helping others. And as the sun set over the lake, I knew that Emily had finally discovered the lessons that money, privilege, and ease could never teach. She had found herself. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.